No one was supposed to live on Irith. The planet sat beyond mapped trade lanes, wrapped in pale auroras and slow-moving storms that scrambled navigation systems. Long-range scans showed breathable air, shallow oceans, and ruins that didn't match any known civilization. Explorers had tried to land before. None had stayed. Some never returned. Dr. Kalen Rowe knew all of this when his survey ship was crippled by a sudden electromagnetic surge and forced into a rough descent through Iritha's cloud cover. By the time the ship crashed into a field of silver grass, its engines were dead, its comms silent, and its emergency beacon flickering weakly against the storm-filled sky. Kalen survived. Barely. He pulled himself from the wreckage with a fractured arm, a concussion, and the growing certainty that no rescue would arrive anytime soon. The planet was too unstable, too far off-grid. He began cataloging supplies, already planning how long he might last alone. That was when he realized he wasn't alone. She stood at the edge of the field, watching him. At first, Kalen thought she was human. She was tall and slender, with skin the color of moonlit stone and hair that fell straight down her back like dark water. Her clothing was simple but unfamiliar, woven from fibers that shimmered faintly in the low light. Her eyes, those were wrong. Too luminous. Too old. "You are injured," she said, her voice calm and precise, spoken in flawless standard. Kalen froze. "Who are you?" "My name is Salith," she replied. "And you cannot leave." Salith led him to shelter before he could argue. Her dwelling was built into the remains of an ancient structure, its curved walls half swallowed by vines and glowing moss. Inside, the air was warm and clean. She treated his injuries with practiced efficiency, using tools and techniques Kalen didn't recognize, but couldn't deny were effective. When he demanded answers, she gave him fragments. Irith was a sanctuary world, she said. A place removed from time's ordinary flow. The storms that disabled his ship were not natural but deliberate, a planetary defense meant to keep outsiders from disturbing what remained. What remains of what? Kalen asked. Salith looked at him for a long moment. Of us. Days passed. Kalen recovered enough to explore the immediate area, though Salith never let him wander far. Each time he mentioned repairing his ship or attempting a signal boost, she shut the conversation down with quiet finality. "You cannot leave," she repeated, as though stating a universal law. Frustration gnawed at him. "You don't get to decide that." "I do," she said gently, "because I know what happens if you try." At night, Kalen dreamed of voices buried under stone, of cities collapsing into dust while a single figure stood untouched at the center. He began to notice things. Salith never slept. She would sit outside beneath the auroras, watching the sky with an expression that was neither hope nor despair, but endurance. Sometimes he caught her tracing symbols into the earth, symbols that matched the ruins scattered across the planet. One evening, as they shared a simple meal, Kalen finally asked the question that had been growing heavier by the day. "How long have you been here?" Salith's fingers paused. "Longer than your species has had language." He stared at her. "That's not possible." "It is," she said, "if you are no longer bound to time." The truth came slowly. Salith was not born immortal. Her people, the Irathi, had once been explorers like humans, curious and ambitious. They had discovered a way to anchor consciousness to the planet itself, drawing energy from its core to extend life indefinitely. It worked. Too well. They stopped aging, stopped changing, stopped dying. At first, it was celebrated. Then stagnation set in. Without the pressure of time, their society froze. Innovation died. Conflict simmered endlessly because nothing ever truly ended. When neighboring civilizations learned of their secret, wars followed. Irith became a battleground. To protect what little remained, the Irathi activated the planetary defenses and sealed themselves away. Most of her people eventually chose to sever their immortality, accepting death at last. Salith did not. Why? Kaelin asked quietly. Someone had to remember, she said. Someone had to remain when the storms faded and the ruins became warnings instead of homes. She was the last Irathi. The planet systems were bound to her. As long as she lived, the storms would continue, the barriers would hold, and Irith would remain hidden. Kaelin understood then why she wouldn't let him leave. If I escape, he said, others will come. Yes, Salith replied. And they will dig. And they will try to take what destroyed us. But keeping me here forever? His voice tightened. That's not protection. That's imprisonment. She met his gaze. For the first time, something like fear flickered across her ancient eyes. I do not know how to be alone again, she admitted. Kaelin spent weeks repairing what he could of his ship, even as Salith insisted it was pointless. He wasn't planning to leave, not yet, but he needed the option to exist. The tension between them grew, unspoken but constant. Despite it, a bond formed. They talked for hours about the galaxy, about how humanity struggled with short lives but endless ambition. Salith listened as though drinking in every word, storing them like rare treasures. In return, she shared memories of cities made of light, of art that evolved over centuries, of friendships that lasted so long they lost their beginnings. One day, Kaelin noticed something impossible. Salith was bleeding. A shallow cut marred her palm, glowing faintly instead of closing instantly as he had come to expect. She watched it with shock. The storms are weakening, she whispered. Because of you. Kaelin frowned. Me? You remind me that time should move, she said. That endings give meaning. The planetary systems responded to her emotional state, loosening their grip. For the first time in millennia, Irith was changing. Salith grew afraid, not of losing immortality, but of losing purpose. If I let you go, she said one night, this world will be found. And if you don't, Kaelin replied, you'll remain frozen forever. They stood on the ridge overlooking the ruins, the auroras dimmer than they had been when he arrived. There may be another way, Kaelin said slowly. You don't have to be the lock anymore. The ending the solution cost Salith everything she had protected and gave her something she had never allowed herself to want. Together, they reconfigured the planetary core, transferring its systems away from her life force and into a dormant, automated cycle. Irith would remain hidden, but no longer dependent on her existence. The storms would fade gradually, not vanish all at once, giving the galaxy no sudden beacon to follow. When it was done, Salith collapsed, breathless and shaken. For the first time, time reclaimed her. Her hair lost its faint shimmer. The glow in her eyes softened. She laughed, quiet, astonished laughter, as she realized she could feel exhaustion, hunger, and something dangerously close to hope. You're mortal now, Kaelin said. Yes, she replied, and terrified. Rescue came weeks later. Kaelin's ship, partially restored, managed to send a narrow-band signal once the interference weakened. A survey vessel answered. When the crew arrived, they found not a forbidden world, but a protected one, marked clearly with warnings and sealed data archives explaining why it must remain untouched. Salith chose to leave with Kaelin. The galaxy would be overwhelming, fleeting, and uncertain, but it would move forward. As Irith disappeared behind them, Salith stood beside the viewport, watching the auroras fade into distant light. You were wrong, she said softly. About what? I did let you leave, she said. I just needed to leave too. And for the first time in longer than history could record, the last immortal stepped into a future that could finally end and begin like everyone else's.